When you hear the word football, the first country that comes to your mind is Brazil. And when you hear Brazil, the first thing that comes to your mind is football. And not just any football, special football. No matter whether you are watching the Champions League final or some random Sunday league game, if someone tells you there is a Brazilian on the pitch, you immediately expect something different. You expect skills, dribbles, tricks, flair, something that makes you stand up and wonder how the hell he even thought about doing that. And that's for a good reason. Brazil have won the World Cup 5 times, more than any other country in history. Every generation of football fans grew up with a great Brazilian team. For decades, Brazil did not just produce footballers, they produced artists. At least that was until now. Brazil have not won the World Cup since 2002. They have not even won a medal at the World Cup since 2002. They have reached only one semifinal in 24 years. And what's even worse, the thing that made Brazil special is gone. In their game against Morocco, Brazil looked significantly worse than their opponent. They were completely harmless for the majority of the game. So how did this happen? How did the country of Pelé, Garrincha, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, and Neymar end up here? What happened to Joga Bonito? To answer those questions, we have to go back to where it all started. In England, football was originally about dribbling, physical duels, and individual battles. In Scotland, it was about passing, combinations, and moving the ball as a team. But Brazil took football and added something nobody else had: joy, improvisation, creativity, expression, samba, disguise, trickery. Football in Brazil was never just a sport, it was liberation. It brought people of different races together before society was ready to do the same. And because of that cultural variety, Brazil were able to create their really unique footballing identity. The ball was not just something to control, it was something to play with. And for decades, they kept producing geniuses. Leonidas, Zizinho, Pelé, Garrincha, Didi, Rivellino. Brazil won the World Cup in 1958, 1962, and 1970, playing football the world had never really seen before. Didi controlled the rhythm from midfield. Garrincha brought chaos on the right. Pelé was the main attacking reference. He could combine, dribble, score, create, and decide games on his own. But then came the problem. Because the next great Brazilian generation with players like Zico, Socrates, and Falcão showed the world some of the most beautiful football it had ever seen, but they didn't win. And over time, people started questioning the effectiveness of the Brazilian style of play. And slowly, Brazil started changing to a more pragmatic side. In 1994, they finally won their 4th World Cup after 24 years of waiting. But that team was nothing like the teams of Pelé's era. They had a strong defensive base, workhorses in midfield, 2 wingbacks running up and down for 90 minutes, and Romário and Bebeto up front. They were still Brazilian. They still had talent. But this was not free-flowing football full of imagination. This was a team built to win. Brazil reached another final in 1998 and won the World Cup again in 2002. They had superstar attackers, but behind them they had a strong defense and midfield who allowed them to have the freedom to decide games. Controllers like Didi and Gerson were replaced by the likes of Dunga, and to be fair, it worked. Until it didn't. Because as the game was becoming more pragmatic, Brazil suddenly stopped producing the same attacking talent. In the 2000s, Brazil had an absolutely ridiculous pool of attacking talent. Ronaldo, Rivaldo, Ronaldinho, Kaká, Juninho, Alex, Jalminha, Adriano, Marcelinho. But all of those players were born in the 1970s and early 1980s. But as Brazilian football kept moving further away from its own identity, the type of player they produced started changing too. And with the exception of Neymar, the generation born after 1990 wasn't the same. More Brazilian players were leaving for Europe at younger ages, and European football, with the influence of Cruyff, Guardiola, and positional play, was becoming more and more structured, more controlled, more systematic. There was less freedom, less improvisation, less of the positional chaos Brazilian attackers used to grow up with, and as a result, Brazil stopped producing complete attackers and number 10s like they used to. They started producing specialists, creative midfielders like Oscar and Coutinho, wingers like Willian, Douglas Costa, and Lucas Moura, strikers like Firmino and Gabriel Jesus. They were all decent players. For many European teams, they were very useful weapons, but weapons that needed a system to unleash them. They were not the system themselves. They could not decide games on their own. Inside European structures, they made sense, but for the Brazilian national team, that created a massive problem, because Brazil was no longer producing the kind of player who could lead the national team, and under Chiche, Brazil seemed to understand that. They tried to build a more positional style of play, but the implementation implementation was never fully convincing. It just didn't work. The distances between players were too big. They couldn't build the natural combinations between them. Against deep blocks, they often struggled to create chances unless Neymar did something on his own. Brazil had fallen into an identity crisis. They were no longer playing their football. The close combinations, the close relationships between players on the pitch, the collective imagination and flair were gone. Players were no longer creating the system. They were instructed to follow the system. They were producing players for European football, then trying to play European football with the national team but couldn't build it effectively. They were too Brazilian to play European football and too European to play Brazilian football. They still had Neymar, and for years Neymar was able to take on that responsibility and saved Brazil multiple times. But when he wasn't there, Brazil had no attacking leader. And now, after years spent on the sidelines, the question is whether Neymar is still physically capable of performing at this level. Because without him, they are lost. Vinicius can be deadly at attacking open space. Rafinha is a relentless runner. Paquetá can create from midfield. Cunha can combine in tight spaces. They are all very good players, but they are not Neymar. They are not Pelé. They are not Zico. They are not Ronaldinho. You can't build the attack around them. And that is a problem because they have no attacking reference to build the team around. Against Morocco, that was evident. Brazil struggled to move the ball forward and create chances. Vinicius played a pretty good game. He scored a goal and looked dangerous when he got the ball. But that is not enough from a player who is supposed to be the main man of Brazil's attack. Vinicius isn't someone who's going to drop deeper, ask for the ball, dribble past 4 players, create chances, and organize attacks himself. And that's what Brazil needed, especially against Morocco. At Real Madrid, he had very successful years under Ancelotti because they were playing for his strengths. They used him as a wide outlet and could release him into an open space. But in the national team, he doesn't have that. In Carlo Ancelotti, they have hired the most Brazilian European coach. Ancelotti is known for being able to transform a bunch of superstars into a winning team rather than for his rigid positional structure. But the problem is he doesn't really have superstars. Every successful Brazilian team in the past had a clear attacking reference point, someone the whole team could orbit around. Pelé, Romario, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Kaká, Neymar. But now, Brazil doesn't have that player. They have good players. They have useful players. They have dangerous players. But they don't have the genius who makes everything around him make sense. They are no longer producing attackers who can carry that freedom. They are stuck between identities. They are not the old Brazil. They are not a fully modern European machine either. Not free enough to be magical. Not structured enough to be effective. Not pragmatic enough to be ruthless. And not creative enough to be Brazil.